The Marionette. Back in '76, there was a toy maker who made the most beautiful dolls. He had all sorts: Russian dolls, French dolls, porcelain dolls, marionettes, and puppets for all the kids in the neighborhood. However, there were only 3 times of the year where his hole-in-the-wall shop boomed: Halloween, Christmas, and when the carnival came to town in the summer. Aside from prime time, the toy makers still made good business. All the children in Silo wanted his toys. Children from affluent families got a new doll every day. Children who were less fortunate could only look forward to Christmas or their birthdays. When visitors came to Shiloh, the locals praised the toy makers' work and recommended it to the town. When the shop had visitors, the toy maker made sure to divert the customers from Walled Doll. He kept the chain strapped around a box made of iron, whose material was dipped in salt and holy water, displayed a design that reminded you of the legendary days of the 14th century. The doll was different. It was beautiful, yes. Soft dark hair made of sarin fiber was pinned up in a nice hairdo that made her nose and round eyes pop, and her all-white belle epique and the tiny floral crown would have attracted any child or doll collector. She wasn't just beautiful. Her limb, arms, and legs had strings tied to every crook and cranny to smooth the movement of the doll, to make her seemingly natural yet clearly meant for entertaining the sick or someone in a bad mood. However, for their fortune, the doll maker made sure to keep her locked away, for reasons that were beyond reason. One night after closing, he let the doll out of her box to clean it out and circulate air to avoid molting and odd smells. By the time he finished disinfecting it and freshening the air, the doll maker turned like so, already reaching for his forbidden work. To his dismay, the doll was nowhere to be found. He scurried around the shop, searching every hole in the wall, tabletop, cabinets, and rooms in the shop. He even had the right mind to take the staircase in the back of the shop that spiraled up to the upper level, which was the second half of the townhouse he rented only blocks away from the heart of Shiloh's town square. He used that space to lodge all his materials to build and design his dolls. Unfortunately, his materials were the only objects he found in the upper level. There was no doll in sight. Now he panicked. He raced down the stairs, leading him back to the shop. There he took a closer look at the windows and the doors. The windows were locked and secure. As for the door, well, it was closed but not secure. The locks, about 6 of them, were not on. This meant his door, even while closed, was still open for visitors, intruders, and escapees. He crumpled to his knees, overwhelmed and trembling with fear. "What have I done?" he scolded himself. "Why didn't I check the locks? How could I forget?" He had put all of Shiloh in grave danger, and he couldn't do anything about it. The doll, on the other hand, made it to a particular part of Shiloh on chance. She saw lights flickering against the night. As she drew closer in the direction of the lights, she took in the machinery, lifting humans in the air, and some throwing them about. Shrieks filled her ears, but there was no sign of danger written in their expression. Instead, they appeared to be enthralled with the machinery that tossed them about. Now in the center of the madness and unknown aromas, the doll moved 1 foot forward like so, ready to find her a host. That was until something with brute force swept her off the prickly, grass-covered ground. Her arms and legs thrashed about, but it was no use. The doll maker managed to find his missing doll and took her back to the shop. There at the shop, he tossed in her box, made of iron, whose walls were dipped in holy water and salt. Afterward, he pulled out a book from a drawer attached to the working table and fished out a book. Its cover was made of leather that seemed worn and discolored. Even its pages clearly lost their original brilliant cream color many years ago. They were now rough around the edges and pallid. On those pages were text written in a language no one understood, not even a multilingual expert. In fact, it seems that the book's language went extinct before the modernization of society. This was the same book used to create all his toys, to make them lifelike and beautiful. However, this doll was an error he can't get rid of. As the doll slammed itself against the walls of the box, desperately trying to tip it over with the hope of shattering the box, the doll maker recited a certain page in his book. With each word, the rage rattling against the wooden material of the doll grew. At one point, she let out a hard growl, a sound no human or animal would ever make, even if they tried. The doll maker mouthed the last line of the spell, with courage racing through his veins as he knew the doll would be bound and quieted the same second he finishes it. Suddenly, his breath hitched in his throat as a strange soggy and cold sensation traveled from his sternum and stung every nerve in his body. For a moment, he was frozen in bewilderment as thoughts like, was that the wrong spell? Was that even the right book? What happened? Did the doll get me? Slammed against the walls of his mind. He finally mustered the courage to peer down at his torso, only to find what looked like a blade running through him. Then it was yanked out of him, causing a doll maker to fall over in agony. With tears whelming in his eyes and his muscles stiff from shock and misery, he managed to lift his head enough to see who had stabbed him. He couldn't open his mouth to ask why, but the figure understood the expression on the doll maker's face and laughed with pride. It was a woman with a red tailcoat designed with embroidery made of gold thread along the shoulders, which were lifted to create a more postured look. Sitting on her head was a top hat with more embroidery that almost mimicked a corset with feathers and lifelike skulls stuffed nicely in the cuff of the brim. Even in his dying moment, confusion was etched on the doll maker's face, wondering why there was a ringmaster in his shop. And why did she attack him?
Silly, silly man.
Her words spewing at him like venom.
Instead of using your talents for what they were meant to be,
she added, swiping up the book and the doll,
you tried to lock them up from the world. Luckily, I came just in time to free your greatest creation.
The doll peered up at the ringmaster with a lifelike grin that made the doll maker quiver, and like a flicker of a candlelight in the night, the doll and the ringmaster vanished. The doll maker was left alone in his workshop to wither. Chapter 2. The Pied Piper of Hamelin. Hamelin, a small town in Germany, was facing a big problem. Rats were running here and there and everywhere. The rats have made the lives of people miserable. So the people of Hamelin went to meet the mayor. The mayor promised the people of Hamelin that he will take care of the problem. A strange-looking man with a funny-looking hat carrying a long pipe walks to the mayor's office. The mayor asked the Pied Piper, "Can you get rid of the rats in Hamelin?" He said yes with great confidence. The mayor said that he will reward him with 1,000 gold coins if he gets rid of all the rats in town. A strange sound was heard by the people of Hamelin, coming from the pipe of the strange man. To the people's surprise, rats of all kinds, big, small, fat, and thin, were all following the Pied Piper. As the Pied Piper walked, the rats kept following him. Finally, the Pied Piper reached the river. As he stood on the bank playing his pipe, the rats all jumped into the river and were swept away. The people were so happy. Soon, the Pied Piper came to see the mayor and asked for his reward. But the mayor refused to give his reward as he agreed. He gave only 100 gold coins as a reward. The Pied Piper was very angry and said, "You've cheated me, and you shall pay for it." The next morning, a strange whistling sound was heard in Hamelin, and before the people could realize what was happening, all the children rushed out of their homes and started following the Pied Piper far away from their town. The people of Hamelin rushed after the Pied Piper and the children, but they seemed to just have vanished. People looked everywhere, but there was no sight of the children. Finally, they spotted a boy who was lame, sitting by the roadside. He said he couldn't walk fast, so he was not able to follow the Pied Piper. Everybody asked him where the Pied Piper went. He said when the Pied Piper reached the mountain, it just seemed to open up and everybody went inside. The people went to the mayor and informed him. The mayor sent his men to search for the children, but never again was they ever seen. The homes in Hamelin wore a deserted and gloomy look. They were missing the laughter and cheer of the children. They were responsible for cheating Pied Piper, and they shall live to regret this. It was a lesson the people never forgot. So, what actually happened in Hamelin? Well, despite there being a lack of records proving a plague of rats in the town, one theory suggests that the children died of some natural causes, and the Pied Piper was personification of death. By associating the rats with the Black Death, it seems to suggest that the children were victims of the plague. Yet, the Black Death was most severe in Europe between 1348 and 1350, or more than half of a century after the event in Hamelin. Another theory suggests that the children were actually sent away by their parents due to the extreme poverty in the German town. Yet, another theory speculates that the children were participants of a doomed children's crusade and might have ended up in modern-day Romania. To this day, historians argue whether the Pied Piper was real or a symbol of something else. Do you believe he was real? And last but not least, for Chapter 3, is an article by martinifisher.com called The Trickster, the Jester, the Clown, the Brief Mythology and Ancient History of the Harbingers of Laughter and Fear, published April 26, 2019. Clown-like characters have been around for thousands of years. Jesters date back at least as far as ancient Egypt. Tracing back the figure of the jester leads us to the mythological trickster. Tricksters are archetypical characters who appear in the myths of many different cultures. They cross and often break both physical and societal rules, violating principles of social and natural order, playfully disrupting normal life, and then re-establish it on a new basis. They openly question and mock authority, and usually fond of breaking rules and playing tricks on both humans and gods. Hermes plays this role in some Greek myths. He is the messenger of the gods, patron of thieves, and the inventor of lying, a gift he passed on to his son, Autolycus. The trickster is also unconstrained by form or gender. The Norse mythology, the trickster, Loki, is also a shapeshifter who can move freely between genders. At one point, he even becomes a mare, but later gives birth to the Odin's 8-legged horse. In later folklore, the trickster is incarnated as a clever man or creature who defends himself by using trickery to survive the dangers of the world. For example, Typical fairy tales have the king who wants to find the best groom for his daughter through ordering trials. No brave or valiant prince or knight manages to win them until a simple but clever peasant comes. Instead of fighting, the peasant fools the monsters and villains and dangers and win the hand of the princess. This leads us to the elusive character of the jester. Early jesters were popular in ancient Egypt and entertained Egyptian pharaohs. The ancient Romans also had a tradition of professional jesters called ballatrons, who moved freely in the company of the wealthy due to the general amusement they afforded. Perhaps the earliest anecdotes of the European court jester were the comic actors of ancient Rome. Several Latin terms used in medieval references to jesters, such as socre, mimi, or histrons, originally referred either to amusing hangers-on or to the comic actors and entertainers of Rome. If there was no formal professional jester in Rome, the comic actors fulfilled his functions. In the 11th and 12th centuries, the titles minstrel, the little servant, was the name given to a wide range of entertainers, including singers, musicians, jugglers, tumblers, magicians, as well as jesters. Both men and women were employed as minstrels, and there is a record of a female jester called Darlin owning land in Hampshire in 1086. In the 12th century, the title of Foolus or fool began to be mentioned in documents, often when these jesters had been rewarded with land as payment for loyal service. A fool named Roland Lerpetor was given 30 acres of land by King Henry II, when he retired on condition that Roland returned to the royal court every year on Christmas Day to leap, whistle, and fart. By the 13th century, some talented jesters were beginning to achieve superstar status. In Europe and India, the most enamored jester was household names, as top-class comedians are today, and stories about their jokes and tricks circulated freely. In India, there is even a kind of lentil soup named after Birbal. The star jesters of China may have also have enjoyed this celebrity status, as Ban Gu's biography of Dong Fengshou suggests that Shou's jokes and sallies, his divinations and guesses, shallow and inconsequential though they are, were passed around among the ordinary run of people, and there was no stripling or cowherd who failed to be quite dazzled by them. An individual court jester in Europe could emerge from a wide range of backgrounds: a university dropout, a monk thrown out of the priority for non-frolics, a jongleur with exceptional verbal or physical dexterity, or the apprentice of a village blacksmith whose fooling amused a passing nobleman. The recruiting of jesters was informal and meritoric. A dwarf jester called Naite, Mr. Little, at the court of King Malkut of Siam in 1851 to 68, described by Anna Leonons in Anna, and the King of Siam, was similarly recruited. He was discovered by one of the king's half-brothers on a hunting trip into the north and brought to Bangkok to be trained in athletic and gymnastic tricks. When he had learned these, he was presented to the king as a comedian and a buffoon. Tenalai Rama, one of these three superstar jesters of India, is said to have earned his position as jester by making King Kurunasivara laugh. According to one story, he contrived for the king's girl to carry him around on his shoulder with him sight of the king. Outraged at the humiliation of his holy man, the king sent some guards out to beat the man riding on the girl's shoulders. Tenalai Rama, smelling impending danger, jumped down and begged forgiveness of the guru, insisting that to make amends he should carry him on his shoulders. The girl agreed, and when the guards arrived, the girl was duly beaten. The king found the trick amusing enough to appoint Tenalad Roma his jester. Of at least equal importance with his entertainer's cap was the jester's function as advisor and critic. The jester everywhere employed the same techniques to carry out this delicate role, and it would take a really obtuse king or emperor not to realize what he was driving at. The Chinese records give us an idea of just how effective a jester could be in tempering the ruler's excesses, as to occasions when his words of warning were either ignored or punished or heavily outnumbered by those when he was listened to and rewarded. Perhaps the reason for this is that jesters are generally of inferior social and political status and are not in a position to pose a power threat. They have little to gain by caution and little to lose by candor, apart from liberty, livelihood, and occasionally even life. They are peripheral to the game of politics, and this can reassure a king that their words are unlikely to be geared to their own advancement. The ruler can be isolated from his courtiers and ministers, who might conspire against him. The jester, too, can be an isolated and peripheral figure somehow detached from the intrigues of the court, and this enables him to act as a kind of confidant. Modern clowns are strongly associated with the tradition of the circus clown, which developed out of earlier comedic roles in theater or variety shows during the 19th to mid-20th centuries. Many circus clowns have become well-known and are a key circus act in their own right. The first mainstream clown role was portrayed by Joseph Grimloyd in 1778 to 1838, who also created the traditional white face makeup design. In the early 20th century, with the disappearance of the rustic simpleton or village idiot characters of everyday experience, North America's circus developed characters such as the tramp or a hobo. Examples include Charlie Chaplin the Tramp and Emmett Kelly's Weary Willie based on hobos of the Depression era. Red Skeleton's Dodo the Clown in The Clown depicts the circus clown as a tragic comic stock character, a funny man with a drinking problem. Now the figure of the clown develops into something a little bit more complicated. The 1980s gave rise to the evil clown character, the attraction of clowns for small children being based on their fundamentally threatening or frightening nature. Batman's The Joker is the evil clown character. He is known by a number of nicknames, including the Clown Prince of Crimes, the Harlequin of Hate, the Ace of Knaves, and the Jester of Genocide. How did this happen? Tricksters and jesters may act strange and tell a nasty joke or two, but they were never considered evil, and children don't have nightmares about them. Why is the more colorful and child-friendly clown so feared today? In more recent decades, one of the great advances in the social sciences is the concept of evil as an evoked feature of social situations instead of a disposition of certain individuals. Specific suggestions were found that people engage in behavior that would be considered evil, and there are specific situations that facilitate pro-social behaviors in others. One of the most important factors that seems to predict antisocial behaviors is de-individualization, a state in which one's identity is hidden. So, as for clowns, researchers have found that the de-individualized individuals are more likely to hunt others, cheat, steal, lie, and even kill under such conditions. Although it was not a requirement of tricksters and jesters, their victims always knew who played the trick on them. De-individualization is one of the hallmarks of clowns. There were funny outfits, crazy wigs, and full makeup with a fake nose. When one is in their clown outfit, Their true identity becomes buried in the minds of anyone observing, and their behavior is likely to change. From an evolutionary perspective, we can think of de-individualization as a tool individuals have often used during activities such as warfare. And battles across human history, soldiers have worn all kinds of costumes, uniforms, and masks. They take away the individuality of any particular soldier, so they all benefit from the effects of de-individualization on social behavior, which leads them to be more okay with killing their enemies. When people are in a state of de-individualization, we can expect them to act as their worst.